Today, in the middle of the pandemic, Donald Trump went back to his old playbook, shifting the blame and trying unsuccessfully to change the narrative, tweeting this, quote, "If I were a senator or congressman, the first person I would call to testify about the biggest political crime and scandal in the history of the USA is by far former President Obama. He knew everything. Do it, Lindsey Graham, just do it." Wow. Joining our conversation, Illinois Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth, who has co-sponsored a bill that would, among other things, expand no-excuse absentee vote by mail to all states. Senator Duckworth, thank you for joining us. And I wonder if there's anything to say or see in that tweet other than desperation.
Well, you said it. Thanks for having me on. It's desperation. The president is doing anything that he can to try to divert people's attention from the fact that how miserably he's failed at leading this country during a global pandemic, and that we now are coming up on, over 80,000 Americans have lost their lives through this pandemic, and it's because of his inaction and failure to lead this country.
Senator Duckworth, I just want to get your thoughts on some of the big headlines of the day. The president has turned pretty harshly negative against Tony Fauci after he testified that any decision about whether or not kids go back to school in the fall, shouldn't overlook or seek to understand the impact of the pandemic on children. I have an 8-year-old. I'm watching the reporting about the cases of inflammatory syndrome associated to COVID very closely. And I wonder what you think about the fact that that was the breaking point for Donald Trump with Tony Fauci.
You would think that the president of the United States would be most worried about some of our most vulnerable populations, including our children. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I can't imagine that I'm going to be comfortable sending my 5-year-old to kindergarten this fall without adequate testing and knowing what the consequences are of some of the these illnesses that are coming out that we're finding are linked to COVID-19 in children. And so for the president to be more worried about himself and how he looks as opposed to, listening to the scientists like Dr. Fauci when it comes to safeguarding our children, it's shameful on the part of President Trump.
One of your Senate colleagues is today in the hot seat. The FBI raided the home of Republican Senator Richard Burr, the chairman of the Senate Intel Committee, no less. Any thoughts about the kind of contact under scrutiny, and is it heartening that the FBI is pursuing any suspicions about potential crimes, no matter the party affiliation? Obviously, this was someone with a mixed relationship with Donald Trump, but still a pretty loyal ally of the Trump White House.
Well, I hope the FBI does proceed in a completely independent manner, and that they are allowed to proceed in an independent manner, and that our Attorney General does not step in as he has so many times in so many other cases. I think this is one where let's just let the law enforcement folks do their jobs, get out of the way of the FBI, and let them do a full investigation, and then we'll see what they find out.
What are your priorities as a member of the Senate? What is their, what are sort of the burning next steps in terms of relief for people who've lost their jobs and the testing problem, which still hasn't been solved? You mentioned testing. I feel the same way about any possible conversation about school reopenings, but we both work in places where the idea of going back in without having daily testing available is almost inconceivable.
Well, so my priorities are exactly that. We need to have widespread testing that's available, that's low cost or free, because it's one thing to be Donald Trump inside the White House having unlimited access to testing. It's completely another situation to be the cashier at a grocery store who is an essential worker, who might be a single mom with 2 kids at home, who's got to go to work, and she doesn't have access to testing, or if it is available, she's got to pay $50 for it or higher than that. And so she's not going to be able to afford that. We need to make sure there's widespread, low cost of free testing available. And that's how our economy is going to be able to reemerge, and how we're going to get back to some sort of sense of normalcy, so that we'll know who is infected, who's not. And we can also do contact tracing and track down folks who have been exposed to the virus. Another thing that I'm working on is the Newborn Cares Act, which is going to allow families with babies born this year to be able to claim their $500 stimulus payment. They were not able to do that under the CARES Act as it was written because it was tied to the 2019 tax year. And babies born this year are tied to 2020's tax year. So their parents need help now, and we're not going to be able to access those funds. And I'm hoping that my newborn CARES Act will pass, and we'll be able to get folks help to the folks who are right now needing help buying diapers and formula and all of those things that new parents have to deal with.
So many burdens when you have a new child, and such an important point.
Yeah.
Every grocery worker, every transit worker, everyone having to be out there involved in any of the infrastructure involved in getting any of us back to work should have access to free daily testing before we have a serious conversation about what that looks like. Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much.